I drove a taxi. I stocked grocery shelves. You may ask how this qualified me to write about the technology industry. Lots of people have, in fact, asked that. I'll tell you why it qualifies me. It qualifies me because unlike all the ivory tower bloggers, rich and comfortable geeks whose masturbatory rants about Apple not honoring their warranties are what passes for corporate criticism online. I've been there. I am not from a rich family. I didn't get to go to the best schools, no one put a PC in my bedroom when I was 6. I worked for an honest living before I gave up honest work to write. As much as the internet circle jerk disgusts me, it's not a patch on the businesses themselves. You Disney people with your minimum wage and all the sexual harassment you can eat labor policies in your nice right to work state, you get away with murder. Anyone who criticizes you does so on your own terms. Is Disney exploiting its workers too much? Is it being too aggressive in policing its intellectual property? Should it be nicer about it? I am the writer who doesn't watch your corporations on your own terms. I don't care if another business is unfairly competing with your business. I care that your business is unfair to the world. That it aggressively exploits children to get their parents to spend money they don't have on junk they don't need. I care that your workers can unionize, make shit wages, and get fired when they complain or when you need to flex your power a little. I grew up without any power at all. When I was working for a living, I had no say at all in my destiny. It didn't matter how much shit a boss wanted to shovel on me, all I could do was stand and take it. Now I've got some power, and I plan on using it to setting things to rights. Sammy chewed his roast long past the point that it was ready to swallow. The fact that he made an error was readily apparent from the start of Freddie's little speech, but with each passing minute, the depth of his error grew. He really fucked up. He felt like throwing up. This guy was going to fuck him, he could tell. Freddie smiled and coiffed and wiped at his beard with the embroidered napkin. Oh, look, the jousting's about to start, he said. Knights in armor on horseback circled the arena, lances held high. The crowd applauded and an announcer came on the PA to tell them each knight's name, referring them to a program printed on their placemats. Sammy pretended to be interested while Freddie cheered them on, that same look of unholy glee plain on his face. The knights formed up around the ring and their pimply squires came out of the gate and tended to them. There was a squire and knight right in front of them, and the squire tipped his hat to them. Freddie handed the kid a $10 bill. Sammy never tipped live performers, he hated buskers and panhandlers. It all reminded him of stuffing a stripper's G-string. He liked his media a little more impersonal than that. But Freddie was looking at him, so with a weak little smile, he handed the squire the smallest thing in his wallet, a 20. The jousting began. It was terrible. The knights cool didn't ride worth a damn, their lances missed one another by farcical margins, and their falls were so obviously staged that even the chubby 10-year-old beside him was clearly unimpressed. Got to go to the bathroom, he said into Freddie's ear. In leaning over, he contrived to get a look at the reporter's notebook. It was covered in obscene doodles of Mickey Mouse with a huge erection. Minnie dangling from a noose. There wasn't a single word written on it. What little blood was left in Sammy's head drained into his feet, which were leaden and uncoordinated on the long trip to the filthy toilets. He splashed cold water on his face in the sink, and then headed back toward his seat. He never made it. From the top of the stairs leading down to ringside, he saw Freddie quaffing more ale and flirting with the wench. The thunder of horse hooves and the soundtrack of cinematic music drowned out all sounds, but nothing masked the stink of the manure falling from the horses, half of which were panicking, the other half appeared to be drugged. This was a mistake. He thought Freddie was a gossip reporter who liked juicy stories. Turned out he was also one of those tedious anti-corporate types who would happily hang Sammy out to dry. Time to cut his losses. He turned on his heel and headed for the door. The doorman was having a cigarette with a guy in a sports coat who was wearing a manager badge on his lapel. Leaving so soon. The show's only just getting started. The manager was sweating under his sports coat. He had a thin mustache and badly dyed chestnut hair cut like a Lego character's. Not interested, Sammy said. All the off-theme stuff distracted me. Nose rings. Blue hair. Cigarettes. The doorman guiltily flicked his cigarette into the parking lot. Sammy felt a little better. I am sorry to hear that. Sir, the manager said. He was prematurely gray under the dye job, for he could DNT have been more than 35. 35 years old and working a dead-end job like this. Sammy was 35. This is where he might end up if his screw-ups came back to haunt him. Would you like a comment card? No, Sammy said. Any outfit that can figure out clean toilets and decent theming on its own can benefit from my advice. The doorman flushed and looked away, but the manager's smile stayed fixed and calm. Maybe he was drugged, like the horses. It bothered Sammy. Christ, how long until this place gets turned into a roller derby again? Would you like a refund? Sir, the manager asked. He looked out at the parking lot. Sammy followed his gaze, looking above the cars, and realized suddenly that he was standing in a cool tropical evening. The sky had gone the color of a ripe plum, with proud palms silhouetted against it. The wind made them sway. A few clouds scudded across the moon's luminous face, and the smell of citrus and the hum of insects and the calls of night birds were vivid on the evening air. He'd been about to say something cutting to the manager, one last attempt to make the man miserable, but he couldn't be bothered. He had a nice screened-in porch behind his house, with a hammock. He'd sat in it on nights like this, years ago. Now all he wanted to do was sit in it again. Good night, he said, and headed for his car. Perry's cast stank. It had started to go a little skunky on the second day, but after a week it was like he had a dead animal stuck to his shoulder. A rotting dead animal. A rotting, itchy dead animal. I don't think you supposed to be doing this on your own. Hilda said, as he sawed awkwardly at it with the utility knife. It was made of something a lot tougher than the fiberglass one he'd had when he broke his leg falling off the roof as a kid. He'd been up there scouting out glider possibilities. So you do it, he said, handing her the knife. He couldn't stand the smell for 1 second longer. Not me. Pal. No way that thing is supposed to come off anytime soon. If you going to cripple yourself, you going to have to do it on your own. He made a rude sound. Fuck hospitals, fuck doctors, and fuck this fucking cast. My arm barely hurts these days. We can splint it once I get this off, that'll immobilize it. They told me I'd need this for 6 weeks. I can wear this for 6 weeks. I'll go nuts, you'll go lame if you take it off. Your poor mother, you must have driven her nuts. He slipped and cut himself and winced, but tried not to let her know, because that's exactly what she'd predicted would happen. After a couple days together, she'd become an expert at predicting exactly which of his escapades would end in disaster. It was a little spooky. Blood oozed out from under the cast and slicked his hand. Right, off to the hospital. I told you you'd get this thing wet if you got in the shower. I told you that it would stink and rot and itch if you did. I told you to let me give you a sponge bath. I am not insured, we'll go to the free clinic. Defeated, he let her lead him to her car. She helped him buckle in, wrinkling her nose. What's wrong, baby? She said, looking at his face. What are you moping about? It's just the cast. He said, looking away. She grabbed him by the chin and turned him to face her. Look, don't do that. Do not do that. If something's bothering you, we're going to talk about it. I didn't sign up to fall in love with the strong silent type. You've been sulking all day. Now what's it about? He smiled in spite of himself. All right. I give in. I miss home. They all in the middle of it, running the ride and stuff, and I am here. He felt a moment's worry that she'd be offended. Not that I don't love being here with you, but I am feeling guilty, okay? I get it. Of course you feel guilty. It's your project, it's in trouble, and you're not taking care of it. Christ. Perry, is that all? I would have been disappointed if this wasn't worrying you. Let us go to Florida then, what? She kissed the tip of his nose. Take me to Florida, let us meet your friends, but... Were they moving in together or something? He was totally smitten with this girl, but that was fast. Even for Perry. Don't you need to be here. They can live without me. It's not like I am proposing to move in with you. I'll come back here after a while. But I am only doing 2 classes this term and they both offered by distance ed. Let us just go, when, after the hospital. You need a new cast. Stinkmeister. Roll down your window a little. Okay. Phew. The doctors warned him to let the new cast set overnight before subjecting it to the rigors of a TSA examination, so they spent one more night at Hilda's place. Perry spent it going over the mailing list traffic and blog posts, confirming the plane tickets, ordering a car to meet them at the Miami airport. He finally managed to collapse into bed at 3 a.m., and Hilda grabbed him, dragged him to her, and spooned him tightly. Don't worry. Baby. Your friends and I will get along great. He hadn't realized that he'd been worrying about this, but once she pointed it out, it was obvious. You're not worried. She ran her hands over his furry chest and tummy. No, of course not. Your friends will love me or I'll have them killed. More to the point, they'll love me because you love me and I love you and they love you. 2. What does Ernie think of me? He said, thinking of her brother for the first time since they'd hooked up all those months ago. Oh, she said. He stiffened. No, it's okay. She said, rubbing his tummy some more. It tickled. He's glad I am with someone I care about, and he loves the ride. He's just, protective of his big sister. What's he worried about? Just what you'd expect. We live thousands of miles apart. You're 10 years older than me. You've been getting into the kind of trouble that attracts armed cops. Wouldn't you be protective if you were my bro? I was an only child, but sure. Okay. I see that, it's nothing. She said. Really? Bring him a nice souvenir from Florida when we come back to Madison, take him out for a couple beers and it'll all be great. So we cool. All the families are in agreement. All the stars are in alignment. Everything is hunky and or dory. Perry Gibbons. I love you dearly. You love me. We've got a cause to fight for, and it's just one with many brave comrades fighting alongside of us. What could possibly go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Perry said. He drew in a breath to start talking. It was rhetorical. Goofball. It's also 3 in the morning. Sleep, for tomorrow we fly. Lester didn't want to open the ride, but someone had to. Someone had to, and it wasn't Perry, who was off with his Midwestern honey. Lester would have loved to sleep in and spend the day in his workshop rebuilding his 64-bit registers. He'd had some good ideas for improving on the initial design, and he still had the CAD files, which were the hard part anyway. He walked slowly across the parking lot, the sunrise in his eyes, a cup of coffee steaming in his hand. He'd almost gone to the Fatkins bars the night before. He'd almost gone 10, 15 times, every time he thought of Suzanne storming out of his lab, but he'd stayed home with the TV and waited for her to turn up, or call or post something to her blog or turn up on IM, and when none of those things had happened by 4 a.m., he tumbled into bed and slept for 3 hours until his alarm went off again. Blearily, he sat himself down behind the counter, greeted some of the hawkers coming across the road, and readied his ticket roll. The first customers arrived just before 9, an East Indian family driving a car with Texas plates. Dad wore khaki board shorts and a tank top and leather sandals. Mom was in a beautiful silk sari, and the kids looked like mall bangbangers in designer versions of the stuff the wild kids in the shantytown went around in. They came out of the ride 10 minutes later and asked for their money back. There's nothing in there. The dad said, almost apologetically. It's empty. I don't think it's supposed to be empty, is it? Lester put the roll of tickets into his pocket and stepped into the Walmart. His eyes took a second to adjust to the dark after the brightness of the rising Florida sun. When they were fully adjusted, though, he could see that the tourist was right. Busy robots had torn down all the exhibits and scenes, leaving nothing behind but swarming crowds of bots on the floor, dragging things off stage. The smell of the printers was hot and thick. Lester gave the man his money back. Sorry, man. I don't know what's going on. This kind of thing should be impossible. It was all there last night. The man patted him on the shoulder. It's all right. I am an engineer. I know all about crashes. It just needs some debugging. I am sure. Lester got out a computer and started picking through the logs. This kind of failure really should be impossible. Without manual oversight, the bots weren't supposed to change more than 5% of the ride in response to another ride's changes. If all the other rides had torn themselves down, it might have happened, but they hadn't, had they? No, they hadn't. A quick check of the logs showed that none of the changes had come from Madison, or San Francisco, or Boston, or Westchester, or any of the other ride sites. Either his robots had crashed or someone had hacked the system. He rebooted the system and rolled it back to the state from the night before and watched the robots begin to bring the props back from off stage. How the hell could it have happened? He dumped the logs and began to sift through them. He kept getting interrupted by riders who wanted to know when the ride would come back up, but he didn't know. The robots' estimates were oscillating wildly between 10 minutes and 10 hours. He finally broke off to write up a little quarter-page flyer about it and printed out a couple hundred of them on some neon yellow paper stock he had lying around, along with a jumbo version that he taped over the price list. It wasn't enough. Belligerent riders who traveled for hours to see the ride wanted a human explanation, and they pestered him ceaselessly. All the hawkers felt like they deserved more information than the rubes, and they pestered him even more. All he wanted to do was write some regexps that would help him figure out what was wrong so he could fix it. He wished that Death Kid would show up already. He was supposed to be helping out from now on, and he seemed like the kind of person who would happily jaw with the marks until the end of time. Eventually he gave up. He set the sign explaining what had happened, or rather, not explaining, since he didn't fucking know yet, down in the middle of the counter, bolted it down with a couple of lock bolts, and retreated to the ride's interior and locked the smoked glass doors behind him. Once he had some peace and quiet, it took only him a few minutes to see where the changes had originated. He verified the info 3 times. Not because he wasn't sure, but because he couldn't tell if this was good news or bad news. He read some blogs and discovered lots of other ride operators were chasing this down, but none of them had figured it out yet. Grinning hugely, he composed a hasty post and cc'd it to a bunch of mailing lists, then went out to find Kettlebelly and Jan. He found them in the guesthouse, sitting down to a working breakfast, with Eva and the kids at the end of the table. Jan's little girl was trying to feed Pascal, but not doing a great job of it. Jan's son sat on his lap, picking at his clown face pancakes. "Morning, guys." Suzanne narrowed her eyes and looked away. The table fell quiet. Even the kids sensed that something was up. "Who's watching the ride?" "Lester," Jan asked. Quietly. "It's shut," he said cheerfully. "Shut." Jan spoke loudly enough that everyone jumped a little. Lyonichka accidentally stabbed Pascal with the spoon and he started to wail. Suzanne stood up from the table and walked quickly out of the guesthouse, holding on to her phone as a kind of thin pretense of having to take a call. Lester chose to ignore her. Lester held his hands out placatingly. "It's okay, it's just down for a couple hours. I had to reset it after what happened last night." Lester waited. "All right," Eva said. "I'll bite. What happened last night?" "Brazil came online," Lester said. "Like 20 rides opened there. But they got their protocol implementation a little wrong, so when I showed up, the whole ride had been zeroed out. I am sure I can help them get it right. In the meantime, I've got the ride resetting itself and I've blackholed their changes temporarily." He grinned sunnily. "How fucking cool is that?" "Brazil." They smiled weakly back. "I don't think I understand." Lester. Kettlewell said. "Brazil. We don't have any agreements with anyone in Brazil, we have agreements with everyone in Brazil," Lester said. "We've got an open protocol and a server that anyone can connect to. That's an agreement, that's all a protocol is." Kettlewell shook his head. "You re-saying that all anyone needed to do to reprogram our ride was to connect to it and send some changes. Trust is assumed in the system, trust is assumed. You haven't changed this." Lester took a step back. "No, I haven't changed it. The whole system is open, that's the point. We can just start requiring logins to get on the network. The whole thing would collapse. It'd be like putting locks on the bathroom and then taking the only key for yourself. We just can't do it." Kettlewell looked like he was going to explode. Jan put a hand on his arm. Slowly. Kettlewell sat back down. Jan took a sip of his coffee. "Lester, can you walk me through this one more time?" Lester rocked back and forth a little. They were all watching him now, except for Suzanne, who was fuming somewhere or getting ready to go home to Russia, or something. We have a published protocol for describing changes to the ride. It's built on Git 3ds system for marking up and syncing 3D models of objects. It's what we used all through the Codicel days for collaboration. The way you get a ride online is to sync up with our version server and then instantiate a copy. Then any changes you make get synced back and we instantiate them. Everyone stays in sync, give or take a couple hours, but you had passwords on the subversion server for objects. Right, yeah, but we didn't design this one to take passwords. It's a lot more ad hoc. We wanted to be sure that people we didn't know could get in and play. Kettlewell put his face in his hands and groaned. Jan rolled his eyes. I think what Kettlewell's trying to say is that things have changed since those carefree days. We're in a spot now where if Disney or someone else who hated us wanted to attack us, this would be a prime way of doing it. Lester nodded. Yeah, I figured that. Openness always costs something. But we get a lot of benefits out of openness too. The way it works now is that no one ride can change more than 5% of the status quo within 24 hours without a manual approval. The problem was that the Brazilians opened like 50 rides at the same time, and each of them zeroed out and tried to sync that, and between them they did way more than 100%. It'd be pretty easy to set things up so that no more than 5% can be changed. Period, within a 24-hour period, without manual approval. If you can do that, why not set every change to require approval? Kettlewell said. Well, for starters, because we'd end up spending all our time clicking OK for 5 cm adjustments to prop positioning. But more importantly, it's because the system is all about community. We're not in charge, we're just part of the network. Kettlewell made a sour face and muttered something. Jan patted his arm again. You guys are in charge, as much as you'd like not to be. You're the ones facing the legal hassles, you're the ones who invented it, we didn't. Really? Lester said. This was a real standing on the shoulders of giants project. We made use of a bunch of stuff that was on the shelf already, put it together, and then other people helped us refine it and get it working well. We're just part of the group, like I keep saying. He had a thought. Besides, if we were in charge, Brazil wouldn't have been able to zero us out. You guys are being really weird and suit why about this, you know. I've fixed the problem, no one can take us down like this again. It just won't happen. I've put the fix on the version server for the codebase, so everyone else can deploy it if they want to. The problem's solved. We'll be shut for an hour or two, but who cares? You're missing the big picture. Brazil opened 50 rides yesterday. I mean, it sucks that we didn't notice until it screwed us up, but Brazil's got it all online. Who's next? China, India, Russia. Kettlewell said, looking at the door that Suzanne had left by. He was clearly trying to needle Lester. Lester ignored him. I'd love to go to Brazil and check out how they've done it. I speak a little Portuguese, even enough to say, are you 18 yet? Anyway, you're weird. Lionichka said. Ada giggled and said, weird. Eva shook her head. The kids have got a point. She said, you people are all a little weird. Why are you fighting? Jan. Landon, you came here to manage the business side of things, and that's what you're doing. Lester, you're in charge of the creative and technical stuff, and that's what you're doing. Without Lester, you two wouldn't have any business to run. Without these guys, you'd be in jail or something by now. Make peace, because you're on the same side. I've got enough children to look after here. Kettlewell snapped a nod at her. Right as ever. Darling. Okay. I apologize. All right, me too. Lester said. I was kidding about going to Brazil, at least while Perry's still away, he's coming home. Jan said. He called me this morning. He's bringing the girl. Too, Yoko. Lester said, and grinned. Okay, someone should get online and find out how all the other rides are coping with this. I am sure they're going nutso out there, you do that. Kettlewell said. We've got another call with the lawyers in 10 minutes, how's all that going? Let me put it this way. Kettlewell said, and for a second he was back in his glory days, slick and formidable, a shark. I liquidated my shares in Disney this morning. They're down 50 points since the NYSE opened. You wait until Tokyo wakes up, they're going to bail and bail and bail. Lester smiled back. Okay, well that's good. Then, he hunkered down with a laptop and got his homebrew wireless rig up and running. A card would have been cheaper, but his rig gave him lots of robustness against malicious interference. Multi-path and plain old attenuation, and got his headline reader running. He set to reading the posts and dispelling the pop-ups that tried to call his attention to this or that. His filters had lots to tell him about, and the areas of his screen designated for different interests were starting to pinken as they accumulated greater urgency. He waved them away and concentrated on getting through to all the ride maintainers who had questions about his patches. But there was one pink area that wouldn't go. It was his serendipity zone, where things that didn't match his filters but had lots of interestingness, comments and reposts from people he paid attention to, and some confluence with his keywords turned up. Impatiently, he waved it up. And a page made of bits of livejournals and news reports and photo streams assembled itself. His eye fell first on the photos. But for the shock of black and neon green hair, he wouldn't have recognized the kid in the pictures as Death Waits. His face was a ruin. His nose was a bloody rose, his eyes were both swollen shut. One ear was ruined. Apparently he'd been dragged some distance with that side of his head on the ground. His cheeks were pulpy and bruised. Then he clicked through to the photos from where they'd found Death, before they'd cleaned him up in the ambulance, and he had to turn his head away and breathe deeply. Both legs and both arms were clearly broken, with at least one compound fracture. His crotch. Jesus. Lester looked away again. Then quickly closed the window. He switched to text accounts from Death's friends who'd been to see him in the hospital. He would live, but he might not walk again. He was lucid, and he was telling stories about the man who'd beaten him. You should just shut the fuck up about Disney on the fucking internet, you know that. Kid. Lester got up and went to find Kettlewell and Jan and Suzanne. Oh, especially Suzanne again. He didn't think for 1 second that Death would have invented that. In fact, it was just the sort of brave thing that the gutsy little kid might have had the balls to report on. Every step he took, he saw that ruin of a face, the compound fracture, the luminous blood around his groin. He made it halfway to the guest house before he found himself leaning against a shanty, throwing up. Tears and bile streaming down his face, chest heaving. Lester decided that this wasn't about fun anymore. Lester came to understand what it meant to be responsible for people's lives. When he stood up and wiped his face on the tail of his tight, glittering shirt, he was a different person. Sweating in the suffocating afternoon heat, his recasted arm on fire. Hilda had shown him the article about Death Waits while they were being screened for their connection at O'Hare. The TSA guy was swabbing his cast with a black powder residue detector, and as Perry read it, he let out an involuntary yelp and a jump that sent him back for a full round of tertiary screening. No date with Dr. Jellyfinger, though it was a close thing. Hilda was deep in her own phone, probing ferociously at it, occasionally picking it up and talking into it, then poking at it some more. Neither of them looked out the windows much, though, in his mind. Perry had rehearsed this homecoming as a kind of tour of his territory, picking out which absurd landmarks he'd point out, which funny stories he'd tell, pausing to nuzzle Hilda's throat. But by the time he'd absorbed the mailing list traffic and done a couple phoners with the people back in Madison, particularly Ernie, who was freaking about Death Waits and calling for tight physical security for all their people they were pulling in at the ride. The cabbie, a Turk, wasn't very cool about the neighborhood, and he kept slowing down on the side of the road and offering to let them out there, and Perry kept insisting that he take them all the way. No, you can just drop me here. Man. For the 10th time. I've got a fucking cast on my broken arm. I am not carrying my suitcase a mile from here. I live there. It's safe. God, it's not like I am asking you to take me to a war zone. He didn't want to tip the guy, but he did. The cabbie was just trying to play it safe. Lots of people tried to play it safe. It didn't make them assholes, even if it did make them ineffectual and useless. While Perry tipped him, Hilda pulled the suitcase out of the cab's trunk, and she barely had time to shut the lid when the driver roared off like he was trying to outrun a sniper. Perry grimaced. This was supposed to be a triumphant homecoming. He was supposed to be showing off his toys, all he wrought, to this girl. The town was all around them and they were about to charge in without even pausing to consider its Dr. Seuss wonderment. "Wait a sec," Perry said. He took her hand. "See that? That was the first shanty they built. 5 stories now. The building was made of prefab concrete for the first couple stories, then successively lighter materials, with the roof shack made of bamboo. The designs are experimental, from the Army Corps of Engineers mostly, but they say they'll stand a Force 5 hurricane." He grimaced again. "Probably not the bamboo one, of course, of course." Hilda said. "What's that one?" She picked up on his mood. She knew he wanted to show her around before they ended up embroiled in ride politics and work again. "You've got a good eye, my dear. That's the finest barbecue on the continent. See how the walls are a little sooty looking? That's carbonized ambrosia, a mix of fat and spice and hickory that you could scrape off and bottle as perfume. You haven't tried Lemmer's ribs yet," he said, and goosed her.